Happy draft day, Steelers Nation. This is going to be a historic day in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And today we're going to be breaking down the latest last-minute draft rumors for the black and gold before the NFL draft officially opens in Green Bay later tonight. First up, we're going to be talking about whether or not the George Pickens trade buzz has any real weight to it and whether or not Pickens will still be on this roster by the end of the NFL draft. Then we'll talk about the other trade rumors surrounding Kirk Cousins potentially going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we'll talk about the draft itself, where Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado is heavily mocked to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21 later this evening. I'm going to explain why I would not take Shedeur, and I would rather take Jalen Milroe in the first round instead. And then we'll finish up today's show with my preferred and my most likely draft targets for the Pittsburgh Steelers as we get closer and closer to the start of the 2025 NFL Draft. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we are going live on this channel for extensive live coverage of every single pick of round one of the 2025 NFL Draft. Of course, we're going to have extensive in-depth analysis on the player that they end up taking tonight. So make sure you click that subscribe button for our extensive draft coverage all weekend long. We will be live for every single pick in all 7 rounds. So let's talk about George Pickens here, guys. And, could there be a big trade on the horizon tonight? Well, there's certainly some smoke that George Pickens has been made available by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and teams are making calls on the very talented wide receiver. And yesterday, George Pickens unfollowed the Steelers on social media, and that has really drawn a stir on Steelers Twitter here over the last 24 hours. This is spurned from a report from Jordan Schultz yesterday saying multiple teams have brought up Steelers wide receiver George Pickens in trade discussions, and he's a name to watch this week. Pittsburgh isn't actively shopping him, but the conversations have taken place. Pickens is entering the final year of his contract. And listen, man, this isn't the first time George Pickens has done this. All right, he unfollowed the team back in 2023 and 2024 during the season after a loss. All right, so this is something that GP has done in the past, and of course, nothing happened in terms of a trade after those instances. And, I think what this is that George Pickens, kind of like the TJ Watt fiasco that we went over a couple weeks ago where he posted the deuces on his Instagram. It's probably just him hearing his name in trade rumors, or he sees a report that he doesn't really like surrounding his name, and he wants to kind of, send a little bit of a message. It doesn't necessarily mean that he knows he's being traded, or it doesn't mean that he's going to demand a trade out of Pittsburgh. None of those things necessarily could apply here. But to be clear, I do think that for the right price, the Pittsburgh Steelers would be open to trading George Pickens this weekend. But I do think that the price tag is going to be relatively hefty. I think that they're going to need at least a day 2 draft pick, at the very least an early 3rd round pick, I think is what Omar Khan and the Steelers would be willing to unload George Pickens for. And then if that's the case, they would go out and draft a wide receiver they really like in the early rounds of the NFL draft to replace his spot as the wide receiver 2 of this football team. But the reality of the situation here, guys, is that although George Pickens from a talent perspective is absolutely worth at least a round 2 pick, if a team's going to invest that day 2 pick in him because he's heading into a contract year, they're probably going to have to give him a brand new massive contract extension. And I just don't see any team willing to give him that. I think teams might be interested in him if he's a 1-year rental for a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick even. But a day 3 draft pick, I'm just not interested in unloading George Pickens if I am the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another possibility in terms of a Pickens trade tonight is that if Pittsburgh is looking to trade down, they could include George Pickens in the deal to get a better draft pick from the team that is trading up. The potential spots that could potentially be looking to include George Pickens in a trade-up scenario: the Green Bay Packers at number 23 and the Houston Texans drafting at number 25. If the trade-down scenario can go from a 4th-round pick to a 2nd-round pick, if you include GP in the deal, I think that is something that the Pittsburgh Steelers would potentially consider. If that's the case, you're not moving down all that far, and if it means getting that 2nd-round pick that the Steelers are trying to get, that might be something that they consider. And then if they do trade George Pickens, these are the 6 wide receivers that the Steelers either A, had a formal meeting with at the Combine, or B, had a top 30 draft visit with in Pittsburgh. Matthew Golden out of Texas, I do think has a chance to be there at number 21 for the Steelers. Emeka Egbuka, Jaden Higgins are some other guys that could go late round 1. Jalen Milroe out of Iowa State as well is expected to go on day 2. Same thing with Trey Harris out of Ole Miss and Alec Ayamainer, who the Steelers have shown interest in throughout this process. Now, my best guess here, guys, is that nobody's going to come to the table with a deal that suits the needs for the Pittsburgh Steelers to let go of George Pickens. And I think that George will be a Steeler by the end of the weekend. We'll see how the contract talks and all this different stuff kind of plays out the rest of the offseason. And I do think the Steelers take a wide receiver probably in the later rounds of the NFL draft this year. But if I had to guess right now, I think George Pickens will remain a Steeler at least until past this weekend. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will George Pickens be traded this weekend? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a few seconds. And when that happens, take advantage of that time by giving me a yes or a no down there in the comments. So could the Pittsburgh Steelers potentially trade for Kirk Cousins before the end of the month of April? Kirk Cousins has definitely been heavily connected to the Steelers in recent days and in recent reports, saying that the Steelers have had conversations with the Atlanta Falcons for a potential deal for the quarterback here. And, I think that it is a legitimate possibility. If the Steelers are running out of patience on Aaron Rodgers, and I do think that the Steelers definitely want to have a bona fide, experienced veteran quarterback leading this offense next year, Kirk Cousins makes a lot of sense. I think schematically he's played in similar style offenses to Arthur Smith throughout his career. I think he would love to play with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. He'd be a good ambassador for the organization as the team's starting quarterback, and he could be a good mentor to a potential rookie quarterback that we expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to take at some point during the NFL draft this year. But if Kirk gets traded to Pittsburgh, I don't think it's going to be tonight. It's definitely not going to be before the NFL draft, all right? Kirk Cousins went through this last year where he went to a new team, and then they drafted a new quarterback to replace him in the first round. I think that, because of that, he's not going to waive his no-trade clause before the NFL draft tonight, and honestly during the NFL draft tonight either. I think the very earliest he gets traded is tomorrow on day 2 of the NFL draft. And, honestly, I think the Steelers would be pretty comfortable letting this play out at least a couple more weeks as they continue to wait for Aaron Rodgers, who has been their preferred choice at starting quarterback ever since free agency began. He was their number 1 quarterback target throughout this entire process based on the conversations that Rodgers has had with head coach Mike Tomlin. Certainly the organization feels like there's a good chance Rodgers will still sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers at some point this offseason, so they might let that play out a couple more weeks. And then, I think they'd be perfectly fine revisiting a potential trade for Kirk Cousins as we get closer to OTAs. This is what I would expect a potential Kirk Cousins trade to look like. You get Cousins, and then you send a conditional 6th-round pick in next year's NFL draft that can turn into a 4th-round pick if Cousins plays, let's say, over 50% of the offensive snaps. Very similar deal to what the Steelers did for Justin Fields last year. I think could absolutely be on the table if they don't land Aaron Rodgers this offseason. So coming up here on Steelers Talk, the latest Steelers draft buzz. When the Steelers are on the clock, which player are they going to be taking? Are they going to go quarterback? Are they going to take a different position? Which quarterback could be taken by the Steelers tonight? I will answer all these questions here in just one moment, but first let's have word from our sponsor here at Game Time. And guys, I'm someone who likes to go to baseball games on the weekends to relax, get my mind off of work, get my mind off of Aaron Rodgers and all that different stuff surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. And thanks to our friends at Game Time, I can always get guaranteed low prices to whatever baseball game I want to go to, whether I'm going to Globe Life Park here in Arlington to watch the Rangers play here at home, or whether I'm in Pittsburgh on my yearly trip to Latrobe for Steelers training camp and I want to go see the Pirates play. I can get guaranteed low prices with our friends at Game Time. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. Makes getting tickets to any live event faster and easier, all on your phone. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Let's face it, guys, Bob Nutting and the Pirates owner is probably not going to pay up for Paul Skeens when he eventually becomes a free agent. Therefore, we need to cherish him for as long as he is a Pittsburgh Pirate. So use the Game Time app today and their guaranteed low prices to give the Pirates organization the least amount of money possible to get tickets to PNC Park and watch Paul Skeens on the Hill this summer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS. It's one word, all caps, CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS. It's right down there in the bottom right of your screen. That's CHATSPORTS, one word, all caps, for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So a lot of people have been putting out their final mock drafts in the national media. Peter Schrager, someone I really trust, Benjamin Albright, Daniel Jeremiah. All of those guys have the Pittsburgh Steelers taking Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders at number 21. So it definitely seems like Shedeur has a good chance to fall to the Steelers this evening. But my gut feeling tells me that Pittsburgh is fooling us yet again with their supposed interest in the Colorado quarterback. And this is something that the Pittsburgh Steelers openly admit to doing. They like to manipulate the media. They like to manipulate the narrative to get people off the scent of who they actually want. I mean, take a look at some of the previous cons from Omar and Mike Tomlin. Back in 2022, they put out the report, we love Malik Willis. We'd even be willing to trade up to the top 10. They told that to Todd McShay. And not only did they not take Malik Willis when he was on the board, but they took Kenny Pickett, a different quarterback, in that draft. And in 2024, last offseason, all they could tell us, every report was saying, we want Mason Rudolph back. What did they do? They went out and got Russell Wilson, and then they traded Kenny Pickett. Then this offseason, all the reports are saying, we want Justin Fields or Russell Wilson back. Then they offered Justin Fields Daniel Jones level money and then didn't even give Russ a contract offer. And now they've been pursuing Aaron Rodgers since the start of free agency. So listen, man, whenever the media and the reports that the Steelers put out there saying we want this player, that definitely is a red flag to me. And then somebody that has no kind of, skin in the game here, all right, Aaron Wilson, who is an NBC reporter. He's a legit reporter for NBC Houston. He covers the Texans. He went on our Texans channel here at Chat Sports, Texans Today, where he said that the meeting between Sanders and the Steelers did not go well. And you might be saying at home, but Jack, the credible guys in the media said that it went well. Adam Schefter, Peter Schrager, all these different people coming out saying that the meeting went well between Shedeur Sanders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And for all I know, that could be the case. But that is something to really think about here, guys, because, if you were going to put out a smokescreen, just put yourself in the position of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you wanted to get people off the scent of who you were actually targeting and you wanted people to think that, the meeting went well when it really didn't, who are you going to put that out to? Are you going to give that smokescreen to Aaron Wilson, a Texans reporter, or are you going to give that to Peter Schrager? Are you going to give that to Ian Rappaport? Are you going to give that to Adam Schefter? All the big reporters that are saying the meeting went well are exactly the people that the Pittsburgh Steelers would be feeding smokescreens to. There's just no reason to feed a smokescreen to a Houston Texans reporter for NBC. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And plus, I would be less inclined to believe Aaron Wilson's report that the meeting didn't go well if there wasn't rampant reports of poor meetings between Shedeur Sanders and the rest of the teams in the National Football League. We can turn the clocks back to the NFL Combine, where there was a ton of reports from a bunch of credible reporters here that were concerning in terms of the combine meetings that he had in Indianapolis this year. Josina Anderson said a QB coach drafting in the top 7, saying that he came off as brash and arrogant. Todd McShay said 2 teams drafting in the top 10, said Sanders didn't bring a quote-unquote professional approach to the meetings. Matthew Berry from NBC said 2 teams drafting in the top 10 had a quote-unquote lesser opinion of him than prior to their meeting. And then Tom Pelissero put these quotes out from current NFL executives and coaches just this week regarding the meetings that Shedeur had in Indianapolis. The worst formal interview I've ever been in my life. He's so entitled. He takes in unnecessary sacks. He never plays on time. He has horrible body language. He blames teammates. But the biggest thing is he's not that good. That's a current NFL assistant coach. Then an AFC executive said this about Sanders. It didn't go great in our interview. He wants to dictate what he's going to do and what's best for him. He makes you feel small. So that's multiple current NFL executives and coaches saying that. Another thing to consider about Shedeur is that out of the 4 quarterbacks that the Steelers could take tonight, Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Shuck, Jackson Dart, and Jalen Milroe, Shedeur Sanders is the only one that the Pittsburgh Steelers haven't watched thrown live during this entire draft process. Not at the Senior Bowl, not at the Combine, not at his pro day where they sent nobody to his pro day, and then they didn't have a private workout with him at Colorado either. They just brought him in for that top 30 visit. So for me, I would be somebody that would want to see my future franchise quarterback that I'm going to be investing a first-round pick in. I'd want to see that guy throw live before I make that massive commitment to that quarterback. And personally, just my personal opinion here, after I've watched every single snap of Colorado's tape over the last 2 seasons, and I just don't think Shedeur Sanders is worth a first-round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers in particular. Now, that's not to say Shedeur can't develop into a legitimate kind of mid-level starting quarterback akin to maybe like Tua Tagovailoa or Brock Purdy, but even if he does become that solid QB1 that needs help around him, I don't know how he compares long-term with the rest of the elite NFL quarterbacks that are in this conference and in this division. All right, you look at some of the super weapons that you see at the quarterback position that the Steelers are going to have to compete with Shedeur Sanders. You got Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. These guys are superstars, and 2 of them are in your division. You have to play them twice a year. You think Shedeur Sanders, even if he becomes a pretty decent starting quarterback in the league, which is possible, but he doesn't have a good arm. He's not a particularly great athlete, and he doesn't have a lot of star upside. And he's going to compete against these guys for the next decade plus on a $60+ million second contract. I just don't see that in Shedeur Sanders' future. And my philosophy when it comes to drafting a quarterback in round 1, guys, is that if he can feasibly be a superstar level quarterback by the time that he gets to his second contract, and he can legitimately compete with Burrow and Lamar and Mahomes and Allen on a yearly basis once he gets to that second deal where he's making $60+ million, if that's the only quarterback that I'd be willing to take. If he can't do that, don't take him in the first round. All right, I think it's that simple. I think the only quarterback that could feasibly be there for the Steelers at 21 or in the first round that has that upside is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. All right, and I think it just makes sense. Milroe's somebody that needs to sit for a year or two. The Steelers are hoping to have a veteran quarterback for the next year or two as they try to get Cam Hayward a ring. He's extremely dynamic with his legs. And he's got a cannon for an arm. You just can't tell me that Jalen Milroe can't develop in the same way Lamar Jackson did coming out of Louisville, Josh Allen did out of Wyoming. All right, so that's the guy that I would be targeting. I have my full breakdown on Jalen Milroe on the channel already, so you guys can check out that video if you haven't already for my full scouting report on Jalen Milroe and why I would consider him here in round 1. When it comes to the guys that I would prefer for the Steelers to take today, I would like them to trade down and get an additional day 2 pick. And then if they could still get any of these 5 players, I would be thrilled with the selection. We already talked about Milroe. I think Omar Hampton could be your true stud number 1 star running back if you can grab him. Derek Harmon and Kenneth Grant, I think, would be phenomenal fits for this football team. And then Jahdae Barron, if you want to go corner, I think Barron, who's got some nickel versatility, would make the most sense for the Steelers. And then the most likely picks here, guys, I think that number 5, you have to acknowledge the possibility of Shedeur Sanders. With all the smoke out there, there's definitely a possibility that there's fire. Number 4, I would say Omar Hampton. If he falls to the Steelers at number 21, the team that has been linked to Hampton the most, the Denver Broncos, there was a report this morning that they may be looking to trade down. Number 3, Travion Henderson. The Steelers have done a lot of research on Henderson. Top 30 visit, formal combine meeting. Khan and Tomlin were at his pro day. Like a ton of interest put in Travion Henderson during the draft process here, so keep your eye on him in the first round. Derek Harmon out of Oregon, I think, has a pretty decent chance of being the top position player on their board if they don't take a quarterback tonight. And then Jalen Milroe. I'm just going to stand on business here, guys. I think that Jalen Milroe is their guy. I feel like he makes the most sense at the quarterback position because they can take their time with him, and he's got that superstar upside, and they don't have to spend a top 10 pick on a potential future superstar here. Plus, he's got a great work ethic and great character that I think Mike Tomlin wants to invest in. So it's the moment of truth. Let me know down there in the comments section, who will the Pittsburgh Steelers take tonight in round 1 of the 2025 NFL Draft? We're going to be live breaking it all down tonight. And of course, we're going to be live reacting to the selection that the Steelers make in the first round later this evening. So today could be a very momentous day in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button right now and join us later today. We'll be live at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time later this evening to break down every single pick of the 2025 NFL Draft.